So just a quick note that before you start, before we go on to the next part that shows the JavaScript code, remember that you will need to put that JavaScript code inside the display method after you extend your edit view. So you're going to extend the edit view, you're going to put it in the view.edit.php file in your module. There's a separate video that explains how you can extend an edit view. Then you would put it like this. So you'll have the JavaScript, then you'll have your JavaScript code. You're going to do the window.onload to make sure that all the elements load. Then once everything is finished, you're going to finish with the same syntax, which is the here doc script. You're going to echo the JavaScript so it's on the screen. You're going to execute the parent display, so it's going to contain your validation code. And now we'll proceed with the validation code setup. Okay, so this is actually another way of doing validation with the suiteCRM, and I think this method may be actually better than others because we're not going to be adding a custom save button to the screen, and we're not going to be injecting any custom code on the save button either. So that's good because you have like this standalone JavaScript that is basically going to interact with your view, and it's very like unobtrusive basically. So the way that this works is that here we have a page with a save button. So from that page, what we'll need to do is we'll need to right click on the save button, and then we'll need to copy the code that is there by default. So let's take a look at it before this code was implemented. And the way that we'll do it is I'll actually remove this. So this part is removing the on-click events that are attached to the save button. So you'll see what I mean in just a second. So I uncommented this, then commented this out, and then we'll launch it again. So the action has been refreshed, and now let's take a look at it. So we have here on-click event that looks like the following. So what we'll do is we'll copy the on-click event, we'll take all of this stuff here that we have, and then we'll use it later on in our code, and you'll see where. But just so you get the idea of where we're getting this stuff from. So to give you the overview, what we're going to do is we're going to remove the on-click events from all of the save buttons that we see on the screen. And then what we're going to do is we're going to attach an event listener on the submit action. So we're going to be listening to the submit action when the form is going to be submitted, this specific form. And when the submit happens, if the form didn't validate as we want it to validate, then we're going to block the validation. This method is also nice because you have the built-in validation which checks for the assigned date, and it doesn't interfere with it either. So we can have our validation and we can have the default suiteCRM validation. The first thing that we'll do is we're going to collect all of the save buttons that we see on the screen. So the way that we'll do it is we'll use the query selector all, and it's going to look for all of the buttons that have the ID save. So in my case, it's going to be the ID save. In your case, it may be something else, but that's what we're doing. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go through every save button that we have on the screen. So that means that it's this button and this button. For each of these, we're going to be doing like that anonymous function, which is going to basically do the removal of the on-click event. So the reason why we do it is because what the on-click is going to do is that it's going to submit the form. So even if we're preventing the submission on the form, then that when we click save, if there's an on-click that submits the form, it's still going to get submitted. So we want to remove this for now. We don't want nothing to happen when we click save without our consent type of thing, right? So okay, so that part is done. The next thing that we'll do is we're going to get the buttons form element. So this button and this button, they have a form that they're attached to, right? So if we take a look at the syntax, so this input button is part of this form here. And this is the form that we're getting. So then to this form, we're going to add the event listener. So we're going to be listening to the submit event that is taking place on the form that's attached to this button. So I hope so far it's clear. So we have this button, we want to know what is that button's form, and then we want to listen to that form's submit action. So here what we're going to do next is we're going to wait for the event to happen, and when the event happens, we have here the validation scheme. So this validation, I just put something very simple just so you get the example. For now, the validation function is either going to return false or true. So obviously if the validation completes as expected, it's going to return true. If something didn't work, it's going to return false. So in our case, what we want to do is just return false, just so you see what happens when it's false. We're going to log this as validation. Okay, so in this case, when the validation passes, it's going to say pass. And when it's going to be like, when it doesn't work, it's going to be validation failed. And we're going to do prevent the default. So this is what actually is going to prevent the form from getting submitted. It's this event prevent default. So just remember the syntax, because event, it's on the event that we're applying this, or rather executing this method on, right? So we're preventing the default on the event, which is the submit event of the current form. I'm going to go to the console, we're going to click save, and when we click save, you see the validation failed. So let's change it, and let's change it to true. I'm going to repair and rebuild and be right back. Okay, so let's click save, and you see it says validation passed. But now it's the validation, the default validation that kicks in by suiteCRM. So how do we combine the two? And the way that this works is basically by using that onsubmit code that we copied before from the save button. And basically where it is, it's right here. So all of this stuff that you see here, it comes directly from the submit button. The only thing that's different is that in front of the return false, we also have to do prevent default. And it's actually this prevent default that is going to prevent the form from getting submitted if it fails the suiteCRM validation. So if this validation fails, the form is not going to get submitted because we have this in place. If we remove this, if the suiteCRM validation fails, the one that's like there by default, it's still going to submit the form. So that's why we just need to include this part ourselves. But the rest is coming directly from that save button. We just copied it from the save button directly. So now let's see what happens when we actually fill in the information. We're going to click save, and what's going to happen is that it's going to pass the validation, our validation, then it's going to pass the suiteCRM validation, which basically takes place here. So that's like suiteCRM actually checking it, and then it's going to submit the form. And that's actually interesting. I guess we can see part of the suiteCRM code is that it says that if the check form edit view, like if it passed this validation, if the method returned true, then sugar Ajax submit form. So it's going to submit the form. If like this did not evaluate to true, then it's going to go to the prevent default and it's going to return false. So that is going to prevent the form from getting submitted because this guy did not return true. So let's save, and you see, so it passed up my validation and then it passed the suiteCRM validation and everything worked. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please leave a like. If you have any questions, please let me know, and do subscribe because more of these videos will be made in the future. Thank you so much.